My name's John McGrath. I'm Artistic Director of Factory International, which is the organisation that runs Aviva Studios here and Manchester International Festival. And welcome to our latest edition of Artists in Time of Upheaval. Artists in Times of Upheaval is an ongoing conversation series with the artists who live and work in the, specific situations of this troubled world in which we live. We've met and talked with artists ranging from Ai Weiwei through to the great Palestinian writer Adoniya Shibli and many, many others. The premise of Artists in Times of Upheaval is to start with the work of the artist, to talk to them about how they make their work, and to then potentially expand that conversation to thinking about the context in which they make their work. It's an opportunity to think about how creativity exists and functions in the society we live in today, and to share, a sense of possibilities as well as challenges. Today I'm delighted that we're welcoming Nihal Arthanayake in conversation with Tribe Arts. Tribe Arts are a Leeds-based radical theatre company who both make work and start conversations about the world that we live in. Nihal and Sam and Taj from Tribe are going to be joining us on stage in a moment. But as ever with Artists in Times of Upheaval, we want to start in some way with the art itself. So we're going to start off with a film that Tribe Arts have made that they developed a few years ago, but explores several of the issues and gives us, I think, a strong and even provocative starting point for the conversation today. Nihal and Sam and Taj will then be on stage to have around about 40 minutes of conversation between themselves, and then we'll open up for questions for the audience. So if you have got questions, please do write them down or make a note of them in your heads, and there will be time for you to raise your questions for the artist on stage. But for now, we'll start off with a film by Tribe Arts.
It's very quiet, isn't it?
Yeah. Don't worry. That's about to change rapidly. Don't worry about that. It's about to. Firstly, thank you for using my Tinder catfish picture back here, which is heavily airbrushed, as you can see. Listen, thank you very much. Another round of applause for that film. So cool. So I guess you self-define as a radical political theatre company, but I'd be intrigued to know how you define radical and how that has changed in the 13 years since you started Tribe Arts. What does radical mean? What did it mean then, and what does it mean now?
So I think so that's exactly how we used to describe it. Radical political. It was like a double word, and like we kind of were advised quite very early on when we started in 2015. Had meetings with venue managers and things that people might have prejudices that come up when they see the word radical in your description, and that might kind of put them off from programming you guys. And we couldn't really understand why that would be the case, because for us it's like, we were a young company, we were full of fire, we had energy. Like radical is exactly the type of word that you would use to describe something like that. And then as we started, operating, and we were sort of in our second year, we started realizing that actually radical at that time meant the thing that it meant post 9/11, which is things of that nature of radicalization of the political terminology that was kind of being pushed for like a decade or more, and we kind of took the political bit off, but kept the radical bit on. Because for us, the radical is something that, historically, theatre artists have always been described as radical. Like, that is really what artists should be at their very core, I think. Whether it's in a quiet way or whether it's in more of a, bombastic way. And so I never kind of really saw a problem with that. The political thing did get a little bit problematic because you had, the Arts Council and other kind of programmers that started really having a definition or an understanding of what that meant. And I think that there was increasingly over especially certainly after the pandemic, there was a feeling that the word political could mean anything and everything, and that it was best to stay neutral. And we've never really, anybody who knows us, we're not really the neutral type of people. Like, we're not neutral. Like, no. I don't think artists should be neutral.
No.
So
neutral in terms of art doesn't work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Why would you make neutral art?
Yeah.
Well, you can just put it up in toilets and bars and Weatherspoons, etc. You can do that if you wish. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the idea of radical is also controlled by the people who set the narrative. So, for example, there was a time when we first started out, radical was seen as, talking about something that no one talks about, but it wasn't necessarily radical from our perspective. It was just, a story about something that's never been covered before in theatre before, and they'd be like, oh, it's a really radical piece, and it's like, all right, cool, it's radical in a certain space. But we realised very early on that our version of radical was different to what people were saying. So I think people like the idea of radical, especially when it comes to like funders and venues. They love the idea of new radical work, and it's pushing boundaries, but it always comes with a restriction. And I guess this is where the idea of censorship comes in as well.
But like, for instance, like, what would you think is radical? Like, how would you, like, if someone says, oh, we're a radical theatre company, what kind of stuff would come into your mind?
Well, firstly, I'm asking the questions. Right,
you see what I mean by radical?
But I think the reason I asked the question is because it means something different to everybody.
Exactly.
Right? So it's one idea. Look, it's a radical act as two Asian lads from Leeds to start a theatre company. Just culturally, that's a radical thing to do.
We're actually the only company in the whole of the country that's run by two South Asian males.
Right.
To our knowledge, we have not come across another company. But like, the reason why I asked that question is because, like, the word like radical, we didn't see this, but we started having meetings with programmers, and like, it was radical, for instance, for us to put up a show like Tribe Talks, which is our flagship show that we started with, and it's effectively like a question time styled format, but interspersed with live performance, music and film. So it tries to theatricalise a conversation. It has no script. It doesn't have a rehearsal period as such. It's completely developed in a different way to what you would traditionally expect a theatre piece to go through. And effectively, it is just us giving a microphone to a Black and Asian person and letting them speak their mind. And that is a radical act. Like, that was a massively radical act for people, and they just weren't comfortable with it. And we never really got buy-in from a lot of venues because of the fact that
it wasn't rehearsed.
It wasn't rehearsed, and it wasn't something that they were able to kind of understand how it was made, and they weren't able to control the audience. So audience contribution seems to be a very scary thing, like for venues.
So what made that theatre then? So there's no rehearsal, no script, people coming in from the street. What made it theatre?
Very good question. We think it's like, the question is, well, why isn't it theatre? Like for us, a communal act of people coming together and partaking in something, understanding something, being vocal about something, whether that's kind of clapping or whether that's whistling or whatever it might be. Like, for us, that is what theatre as an experience is inherently, and that's what Tribe Talks is.
Yeah, because one thing that we've always pushed is especially with Tribe Talks, we've tried to implement this, and obviously venues will have their restrictions, but we don't have this idea of you come into the space and you've got to sit there and be completely quiet and not say anything. I don't know if you've ever been to what's that company called? Blue Mountain Theatre.
Oh yeah.
So it's a Jamaican originated theatre company, and their shows are just nuts. Like, people are not talking throughout to a point where it's disrespectful to the performers on stage, but they are reacting to what's happening on stage, and it's almost like the audience becomes part of the performance. And we've always tried to implement that in our Tribe Talks, because for us, for a start, you're eating while you're having that conversation. A lot of venues don't like the idea of that. A rustling packet of crisps is seen as like a big disrespect. We try to implement that in our spaces, because we're like, well, actually, that is how theatre is done in our homelands, in our origin countries of our grandparents and parents. That is how theatre is done. You don't sit there quietly and just watch. You are partaking and you're participating while the performance is happening. And that's why for us, the whole experience itself becomes a performance. But we've also, the format of Tribe Talks is also interspersed with actual live performance. So there is a performance element to the actual format as well.
What are your first memories of facing pushback? And what did that pushback look like, in the sense that, we want you to be radical. Yeah, we want you to deliver radical work. but here's a set of criteria you have to work it within.
Yeah.
What are your
Well,
first memories of that?
That's the dichotomy, because you can't really say that you want on paper that you want to be radical, but then have a secret meeting before the thing to kind of set the whole agenda, right? Like that for me doesn't work.
And has that happened?
Yeah, completely. That has happened to us. And I mean, we could write a whole book about that question that you've just asked us. Like, we've had very strange, weird, otherworldly conversations with, like, you know, very senior people within the art sector. And, you know, I think that some of the meetings have been quite questionable in the stuff that they've expected us to do, or
give us a sense of that conversation specifically. I remember speaking to a black author who wrote a scene where a black family were eating spaghetti, and his white editor said, "That's not realistic. Black people don't eat spaghetti." Like, he genuinely told me that happened to him, which is wild, right? Like, the idea of that. So interesting. I would like some specifics on the kind of conversations you've had.
Well, I mean,
Colourblind casting is one. Without going into
obviously without naming any
without
without
going into the absolute specifics, but colourblind casting, we've always had a perspective on colourblind casting, in the sense that, you know, the original idea for it was for equity and equality purposes, and be able to get black and brown bodies on stage and not be too concerned about what the character is. But there's a point at which it just looks stupid, right? And, you know, we've seen productions in the past where, without getting into the specifics, you know, we are made to believe that someone who's blatantly of African origin, someone who's blatantly of white European origin, and then someone who's blatantly of South Asian origin are all just related. And it's been set in a time period, I think it was the 40s, where that just would not even happen. And if it did, it would come with so much more than just the fact that we're just meant to believe that this is a family. You know, there's one example that I've got of, again, I won't name the play, but it was set in the 40s.
You can name the play. You just don't have to name, like, the people. You can have to, like, the play is generic. Name the play.
Okay, Streetcar Named Desire.
Okay, fine.
Right?
There you go.
No
one's going to sue you.
There's a black sister and a white sister. I think it's set in the 1940s in Deep South. That's just ridiculously stupid. Like that just would not happen. And if it did happen, you need to explore what that would look like politically in society at that time in the Deep South.
Right.
And I think calling out things like that has not got us into trouble, but there's been a lot of, like...
I mean, it's not even really calling. Like, we just basically did it's a two-tiered answer, really, because you get the censorship or from your peers, the artists making work, and us having an opinion, but you also get the censorship from the power structures that be. So there's like it's kind of a two-tiered thing. Like, we've had, like, really bizarre meetings with, like, very senior people within the industry who run buildings, who have sat us down and basically tried to play power politics with us and make sure that we know our place. Like, you know, as long as you kind of know what it is you're here to do and why you're here to bring in the brown pound. And if you can't do that, then you need to let us know. You know, it's all that kind of thing. And it's like, that wouldn't really be expected by, like, a white counterpart.
Is it as explicit as that, or is there a code that is used? Or is it just simply explicit, like, brown guys, brown people, you bring brown people?
Well,
right?
that
actually happened explicitly with us at one point. But it was also like what Sam said, but now I think people do it in a different kind of way. But we've literally done an event, you know, at the end of the event, there was an evaluation period, and they literally said, like, you know, well, there wasn't many black and Asian people that turned up, so we probably won't be commissioning you guys again. And we were like, right, okay, that's fine.
But that's an interesting point. So there are two young black women based in Manchester who put on an event here, right? Where's John? John, remind me, Black Creative Trailblazers, right? They put on this event here, and it was extraordinary. They brought over probably about 1,000 people from the African diaspora into this space, right? And they proved that they had connection to their community, they had authenticity within their community, they could bring people. There was art all along these walls here, there was a jewelry stand here, they had poetry and music, and they absolutely proved that they could bring an African audience to this venue. and we, and I say we because I sit on the board of Factory International of Viva Studios, it was a triumph. So there is a sense that if you do run a venue like this, you don't assume that you just put some black faces on posters outside and suddenly you promote it and you think that you can just put that picture on there. It can happen.
But
So you have to prove to a certain extent that you have links to your audience because you are embedded in your communities.
Yeah, I think for that particular experience that we're speaking about, it wasn't explicit that was what was expected of us. So as far as we were concerned, it was part of a bigger short festival, and we were just doing a piece within that festival.
Right.
As far as we were concerned, all the marketing was done by the venue, and we were just turning up and performing. And it was very early on in our career as well, so it was very, it's probably like in the first year of us being kind of set up. But it was
I would push back on the expectation of that though. Like, you know, the fact that you said that you know, you'd obviously be grounded in your audience, and you know they'd obviously come. But yes, they would, and like inherently, obviously, like for us, the kind of work that we put on, it's not so much about us, but the kind of work that we put on. So like, if we're going to be doing a show about the empire or partition or whatever it is, inherently, Black and Asian people are going to come to that. Like, it doesn't need to be on the tin that that's what you need to bring in, and the artists themselves don't need to be constantly reminded that that's what they're there to do, because then otherwise you feel like you're functional, like you've got a utilitarian purpose to why we're doing all of this. And it feels like a charade, you know? It feels like I'm playing a game with somebody else, and this is how I need to stay within that. And I think that the point is that a white equivalent artist wouldn't be expected to have all of those expectations, all those bells and whistles. And I think that's the issue that we have. Because if you're really making work for your community, that will happen. Like, we don't need to go out of our way to have some kind of, you know, outreach campaign or community outreach campaign, which is how they're kind of usually framed within the arts. But I suppose that's...
Do you think that's... I get that perhaps you would start to think like that way, but there is also a sense that, and we're talking about, you know, censorship here today primarily, so I don't get too embedded in this, but you are promoters and creatives, right? Like if you look at so many artists, I mean, it'd be interesting to see when Ai Weiwei lands here, how many of the Chinese diaspora come here to see what Ai Weiwei is doing here. But there has to be an element of you bring an audience with you. Surely you can't completely disassociate.
No, but I think that comes without saying, and I think that's just inherent. I had a really weird, this always comes up in a conversation that we have, right? When we first started out, the first show that we did, Tribe Talks, which was about the effects of empire and colonialism on specifically British, Black and Asian people. And we got calls when we were selling the tickets of like white people calling us up and saying, is this show for us? Like, can we come and see this? And I was really shocked, right? Because I wouldn't call like, you know, Manchester Royal Exchange and say, hey, you've got Oliver Twist on, is that for me? Like, can I come and see Peter Pan?
But that's not strictly fair, because you did say we're going to speak to Black and Asian people about their experiences. Now, absolutely, we're all expected to understand white voices and white opinions, and white people, it would be weird to say, well, that's just for Black and Asian people, because it kind of lacks curiosity, right? You know, I'm super intrigued as to what someone from Yorkshire thinks, a white person from Yorkshire thinks, or Essex, where I'm from, super intrigued to find that out. So there is a lack of curiosity. But you do promote it in such a way that says we're going to talk to Black and Asian people.
Yeah, and subliminally that'll come across on the marketing and the nature of the event. You know, our creative focus is always about making space for our communities first.
Right.
But we do that without having to say this is.
And Oliver Twist doesn't do that. Oliver Twist doesn't say, please, sir, can I have some more because I'm white?
Yeah, but Oliver Twist. There's a lot of things around the Oliver Twist, Oliver Twist is not the thing that I'm talking about.
You could have an entirely black cast for Oliver Twist and it probably wouldn't make any difference, right?
This is going back to the colourblind
casting conversation.
Right.
I don't think you could, and you'd have to obviously think about the whole dynamics of that, like, because you've got to think about what that represents, right? So, like, it's Victorian London, wasn't many black and Asian people at the time in London, and if there were of a certain class, certain expectation. So sometimes the idea of colourblind casting, whilst it's good for the artist in terms of there should be opportunities, in terms of what you're projecting a false version of history that people who have no idea about are coming to see that place and thinking, oh, well, it's like Bridgerton, right?
So, no, but this is interesting. No, it isn't actually. This isn't going off piece. So when you look at Bridgerton, do you think it's ridiculous?
I wouldn't say ridiculous, because I know there's, and I've never watched it, but I know there's a queen in it who supposedly, I've read an article about how she may have had some kind of dual heritage. Don't know much about the queen. So I wouldn't say it's ridiculous, and I think sometimes those kind of shows need to exist to unpack something and unravel something that isn't really taught in our schools and in our mainstream media. But at the same time, I mean, again, I've not watched it, so I can't really say. But the idea of just that it's just absolutely normal, and I don't know if colour is acknowledged in Bridgerton. I've never watched it. I don't know if it's acknowledged that this person is this skin colour.
If it's just the case of, I mean, I haven't watched it either, but if it's just the case of having black.
Has anyone watched Bridgerton?
No,
okay,
it's supposed to be like the most popular thing on Netflix.
Yeah, it's massive.
But maybe that's an indication of what we're saying.
We've got time for a Q&A afterwards, so don't worry.
We should really talk about censorship as well. Maybe.
No, but this is interesting because, firstly, others would think that the things that you are criticising are in fact radical.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So the casting of people of colour in those roles is radical.
Yeah.
Another thing is that you might be trying to censor people who say, actually, we can put a black person in Victorian London, because there were black people in Victorian London, right? Or, I mean, Queen Elizabeth I complained about the amount of Moors on the streets of London, right? So there has been people of colour there. So, interesting, while we're talking about censorship, you yourself might want to censor artists who want to place people of colour in those.
But I think to censor, it requires action, and I think we would never, I would never go out and action that censorship against someone and say you can't do that. I have an opinion on it.
I think both can be true. Both can be true. Like for us, we're living in a liberal democracy, right? Like I think both can happen.
Increasingly less, perhaps.
Yeah, well, that is probably the conversation we need to have. But like it's the fact that like in a society that is fair, I would expect both of those things to exist. I think there's a conversation to be had about colourblind casting. I think it was there for a certain purpose at a certain time. I think it does its thing. But it is also disproportionate. It's disproportionate in the way that it casts more black actors than any other global majority, for instance. It's disproportionate in the way that it just places black bodies into things without any context, which is the point that Sam was making. Like having having a white mum or a black mum and a white child and a white dad, like that, like. It's a confusing thing for somebody who doesn't understand what they're trying to do there.
So do you think that the casting of Idris Elba in Thor, which is ultimately a Scandinavian mythology, where there were no people who looked like Idris Elba in traditionally Norse mythology, do you think that was ridiculous?
I haven't actually seen. Is it a film?
Yeah, it's a film.
Idris Elba. In film, it happens a lot less. You'll notice it happens a lot more in theatre because there seems to be this assumption that you can suspend your disbelief in theatre more than you can do in film. Right. So with film, they'll contextualise it a little bit. Like
there was no context to it.
Right.
There was no. And what the way I bring that up is because people criticised Idris Elba's casting because he's black in the middle of Norse mythology, where there would have been no sense of that. And his point was, none of this is real. You know that, right? Like, there was no one throwing a massive golden hammer, like, it wasn't real. But interestingly, those people who had criticised Idris Elba's casting share an argument that you share.
But I haven't seen it, but I don't think I'd have a problem with that because it is mythology, right? So again, it's relative. It's relative to the conversation and the thing. I don't think there's an absolutism.
Bridgerton is mythology, but it's fiction. So within theatre, within the creative arts, you must be able to take creative license, right? To push your audience.
But
I think to a certain extent, I mean, and again, I guess that's talking about fictional characters, but for example, Hollywood has forever depicted, Egyptian kings and queens, biblical figures as white people with blue eyes and blonde hair.
Jesus
And
being
people,
white.
people have a big issue with that now, even though it still continues to happen. But at the same time, it would be interesting to see what someone would say if one of the richest people from Africa, Mansa Musa, was played by a white man. I mean, that would be ridiculous.
Yeah,
Do you know
or Martin Luther King.
Yeah, and
or-
there's no calls for like, you know, the historic like white Jesus films of like the 60s and 70s to be remade and have like, you know, a bit more of an accuracy in terms of
Yeah.
like no one makes claims about that. So it seems to be a conversation that's very much skewed on one side, which
Yeah.
you know it's fine. But if we're really going to be fair about it, then you kind of also need to talk about the other side, which is what we're really concerned about, which is historical accuracy. But again, the project matters. Like historical accuracy, if it's relevant for the project. Like if it's
Yeah.
not, and the project's trying to do other things, then yeah, creative license. Like do what you need to do.
Do you feel that your ability at Tribe Arts to create the art you wish to create is harder now than it was in 2015?
Yeah,
100%.
definitely.
100%.
Yeah.
We always talk about this.
Why? And has that become increasingly difficult since what's taken place, the terrible events, that's a horrible word to use, in Gaza? Has that changed? Has it almost that been a catalyst to it becoming even harder for you to do that?
I think we're lucky in the sense that we're an organisation that's been very self-sufficient. Like we've never done any show within a venue, like in a traditional theatre venue. All of our shows have either happened within experimental spaces, within museums. So we've not really had the machinery of what it would take to put on a theatre show. We've not had like separate marketing teams, PR teams, comms teams. We've not had any of that. So we get to make all the decisions about everything, every one of our productions. We get to decide who is cast, how they're cast, the script, the things that are being said, the direction, the people that are in it. We get to decide everything. So we're very lucky in that sense to have that type of freedom. But it's a quid pro quo. Like that amount of freedom only comes because of the choices that we've made not to program in places that would take all those freedoms away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So so we personally probably wouldn't have, it's not got harder for us to make things like that because it's always, you know, we just make a decision about what we're going to do and it happens. But from colleagues and other people who are working in the industry who are putting things on in established venues, yeah, absolutely it has. I mean, Manchester's a really good place in point because you've had quite a lot of quote-unquote censorship in very traditional venues around things that you wouldn't really think that, you know, a show would get cancelled for or whatever, and it's happened, you know.
I think in 2015, personally, the industry was in a bit of a bubble. It was a nice little bubble, especially from our perspective. We always talk about this. That was like, everything was kind of like, there was a lot of new work. There was a lot of black and brown artists. There was a lot more initiatives. Everything was really nice. And, you know, things were happening and it was quite progressive. And then I think it was just before COVID, wasn't it? Around COVID, just before COVID, venues started becoming a bit more politically aligned, or they tried to at least. In the murder of George Floyd, everyone wanted to put up a black square on their feeds, but then you had certain venues doubling up as court systems for like Birmingham Rep, for example, which put them under fire with the local communities. So I think it was around that time for me, around the COVID time, that things started changing and things started dipping a little bit. And I think it's since then, a lot of venues and organisations have left a sour taste in my mouth about certain things that they've done, certain performative things that they've done. For example, you know, everyone put up a black square, but if you go to some of those venues now, what's come of the commitment they made to black and Asian engagement, etc., and being anti-racist? You don't see it.
So we were inundated during the George Floyd thing by cultural organisations that contacted us because they knew that we were sort of specialising in race and to deliver anti-racist training to them, which is another thing that we usually do, which was crazy. And we got commissioned.
What does that involve?
So I think it involves opening up questions and apertures to how organisations understand how things should be made. So with that particular organisation, we were given the brief that we wanted to look at our board and our decision-making processes and help us to be more diverse in the way that they make decisions. And one of the things that we do is we don't really have a set program that we do.
Yeah.
We kind of look at the organization and see and kind of be quite organic in the way that the organization runs. But one thing that we absolutely do is we have a fact-finding point where we're trying to ask the venue questions to understand how they operate. And I remember these guys approached us, contracted us, gave us a brief, invited us into their board, and then reprimanded us because of the things that we were saying that they didn't like, right?
Give me an example of what you said they didn't like.
So I think one of the conversations that we were having, this is going back.
I'm trying to remember now.
It was something to do with Sumatran poetry. I remember it was something.
Sumatran puppetry. That's it, puppetry.
Puppetry.
Yeah.
Sumatran puppetry. Right. It was a board that was fully white, and they were all very proud of the fact that they all.
We're good friends.
We're good. No, not good, just good friends. They were all on the same page. That's how they described it. Yeah. We're all on the same page. And I was like, is that a good thing for a board, though? I said, is that a good thing? Like, I think the whole point of a board is that you're supposed to have, different, everyone's supposed to be on a different page, right? And then you're supposed to find the page.
Yeah.
And they didn't know how to answer that. And I was like, because that's how I would think that a good functioning board works, right? And so then I started questioning and sort of, digging a bit deeper. And one of the guys, I think he was the chair, you could literally see him turn, a different colour, right, on screen. And he started saying, yeah, I don't know, I think we're being questioned here, and I feel like you've got an agenda. I was like, yeah, we have, it's your brief. That's literally the agenda that we have. It was just...
So they have...
I think he said, I'm being discriminated against.
I want it on
record.
Yeah. The chair who invited us in to give that anti-racist training was being discriminated against. You can't make this stuff up.
Why would he think that?
I think because we called out certain comments that were being made. For example, one board member was white presenting, but she was of mixed heritage, and she described herself as a mutt. And we were like, okay, big red flag for your board.
No, it was a white woman who used the word mutt, and we noticed that she didn't have a problem with it.
Oh yeah, that's it. Sorry, yeah.
And I was like, well, what's the point of having diverse backgrounds if you're not going to be able to call out stuff?
And there was another guy who was a teacher who used to teach in that town where this venue was based, and he said, one thing we've realised that when we try to engage certain communities for certain events, we don't even bother. And I was like, oh, can you be more open? It's like, yeah, the Asian community, I mean, if you knocked on an Asian person's door in our town and told them about a show that's happening in the venue, they just tell you to go away. I was like, why would they?
Yeah. Oh, they're really hard to reach audiences. We don't even, they're really hard to reach. I said, are they? I was like...
And then he also said, I think this is the same guy that was like, I've noticed that Asian boys, especially Asian kids, they've got no time for the arts, and they don't really amount to much when it comes to the creative arts after school. Yeah, and this is a teacher, this is a guy who taught Asian kids for 20 to 30 years.
We were genuinely bowled away, but that was one thing. But kind of going back to the censorship element that you mentioned, I mean, I think the late great Nina Simone said it the best, right? In an interview, she said when asked what is freedom, she said no fear. And I think that is the most beautifully succinct explanation of freedom. And if you have fear, and you can take this on a society level, global level, or on a sector level, if you have fear, then you've got no freedom. Yeah. And I think the sector, and I think I'm very, the sector is full of it. The reason why most of the institutions are preserved where they're really playing it safe with stuff, it's because of fear. If you was to really look under it, the idea of censorship in this country is all to do with fear. We don't have laws saying you can and can't do that. You have societal censorship. What is accepted by the society, what is accepted by majority, that's how censorship works. Protest, for instance, right? It's been completely curtailed in this country.
Has it? As I walked past here, I saw 100 Palestinian flags. People were out.
Or at least it was going...
And then there was an Iranian Israeli protest going on in another part of Manchester, both happening today. So when you make a blanket statement like that, I don't agree with you.
What I probably meant was there was talk of it. There was talk of it, right? There was talk of it when there was the previous government that they were going to introduce legislation to kind of curtail stuff. I mean, yes, there are protests going out there with stuff like that, but the point is there's also equally protests to try and close that down.
And but that's a conversation. Yeah. That's a democracy.
Yeah.
You can't expect... Sorry?
Exactly. Not if you remember Palestine Action.
Yeah, but that went to the courts, and that has been reversed, is it not?
They're still being arrested.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only been.
Yeah.
We actually had this conversation because you actually
Yeah.
made this point in the car when we were coming
Yeah.
down, and I said, well, yeah, that's a legal thing now. It's not censorship; it wouldn't be classed as censorship. But the point that I'm making is that when you have fear within something, within a society or within a sector, you don't have innovation and you don't have conversation. You don't have that conversation. It just gets closed down. People could, if the legislation of the previous government ever got implemented, we would have been like more repressive than we are, that we say other countries are. Like they would have more rights, to the way that they'd be able to protest compared to us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really interesting about this whole thing is that in the West we say that we're the land of the free, but actually there's a lot of other things going on under the surface that are maybe self-repression, that are maybe self-censorship in the way that conversations are controlled. And I think that's where the rise of the far right has happened, because the idea of freedom of speech, from my perspective, has come from the idea of preserving a white person to be racist and to have the freedom to be able to say those things. It doesn't really give me, as a person of colour, the same microphone to have the conversation that I would want to have. And I think that's what we were talking about.
Do you think that there is censorship from the left as well?
Yeah.
There is, and we were talking about this on the way down actually, positive censorship.
Yeah.
And I think this can really work against whatever the left is, because I hate using those terms, because the left and right. But I guess, we know...
I brought it up because you said the word far right, so I thought, well, okay, let's bring
there's a general understanding of what left is and what right is. And I think, when there's a censorship of certain voices, and it's done, and it's made to look like it's done with the intention of protecting those who are normally on the left, I feel like that does a big disservice to those on the left, if that makes sense.
It doesn't make sense to me. You might need to.
So, for example, the left is generally considered liberals, Muslims. I'm being very general here, but I'm just saying, that's the left. The non-racist, the people of colour, etc. And the right is generally seen as the racist, far right, thuggery, white working class right. But my point is, when we start implementing, and I'm not saying this has happened, but when we start censoring voices from the far right simply because they might say something that might hurt the sentiments of someone on the left, I feel like that's a disservice to people on the left. Because what that does is it pushes a narrative of, and you see it all the time on social media, and I've seen it so much recently, this idea of it's a two-tier system. Oh, the countries all they care about is the Muslims. The Muslims have the voice. That's why they were performing in Trafalgar. They were praying in Trafalgar Square, because this is becoming a Muslim country. Someone even said King Charles is a Muslim. It's getting absolutely ridiculous. But everyone's talking about this Muslim takeover and Muslim domination. And me as a Muslim, I'm just like, I'm not even thinking about that. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what I'm talking about. So I feel like
you don't have a Islamic ray gun.
I do, but I left it at home today.
Fine, good, yeah.
I couldn't.
Don't worry, he's not going to bring out his Islamic ray gun and convert you all today.
But do you know what I mean? So I feel like there is a disservice that is also done to us on the left, I guess, when you try to shut those voices down. And I think those voices, you might not like the sound of them, but I think they're important, because I want to know, for example, why a racist white person is racist. I want to know. I want to understand that. What is it?
I'd love to see a play. This might be completely crazy, but I'd love to see a play of someone who's got far right ideology, and they've invited people to, have the freedom to be able to talk about what they want to talk about. I personally,
it's called Question Time. You watch it every Thursday on the BBC. They invite loads of fascists on every single week.
I would genuinely be interested to go and see something like that, because you can start a dialogue, right? You can actually have a conversation.
Yeah.
You can begin to understand what they're saying.
Yeah. So a little while ago, probably just before Christmas, my 16-year-old daughter and I saw two men putting up flags. Right? It was about 9:30 at night. We were driving home, the four of us in the car, my wife and my son as well. And we saw these two men running across the road with this big ladder, right? And it was like, well, we know what you're up to, right? You're not washing windows at 9:30 at night, right? Which is not really a great nocturnal thing to do, wash windows. So my daughter and I said, let's go talk to them.
Interesting.
Right? So my daughter and my son went, what are you doing that for? What? And they were like, we're out, we're going to go in. So we parked the car up, drove, like reversed out the drive, went and found them, pulled up next to them. They looked like, it's going to kick off here, right? The look that they gave us. And the first thing I did was get out of the car and hold my hand out and go, hi, I'm Nihal. What's your name? Right? So that suddenly mellowed everything. I started talking to one of them, and when I said to him, why are you doing this? You know, it was two people of colour, myself, my 16-year-old daughter. My 16-year-old daughter then getting a conversation with the other chap. And it was quite revelatory, actually. So the idea is if you're on social media that anyone putting up a flag is a racist, right? So I said, why are you doing it? He said, well, so the road we live in Stockport, there is a hotel which houses asylum seekers on it. So he said, my family queue for food banks and they're in there getting food for nothing. Right? And then he also said, no one listens to us.
Yeah. And that, do you know, that is true. Like, I think that's that frustration that you've just highlighted there, that is really the underbelly of what's going on. And I think one thing that the West has been absolutely amazing on, because this is what they've traded on for 400 years, right, is labels. Is being able to...
We were pretty good at it as well. We literally had a caste system and still have a caste system, so we're pretty good at labelling things ourselves. Well, actually, come on, let's not start blaming white people for everything.
But that was perpetuated under the empire more so than anything.
We come on, we had a caste system before the British turned up.
Not in the way it's completely understood now. Like that was framed within a religious context, and it got changed into a political, socio context. But that's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. Like I think that
try being an untouchable 500 years ago in India.
Well, that's the only thing that anyone remembers of
Dalit,
of the caste system is the untouchable.
Yeah.
You don't remember the actual system; you just remember that.
Yeah.
But that's the point that I'm making: is that these ideas and branding, which the West is absolutely amazing on, like branding and marketing, and being able to position ideas through labels and make blanket statements about and make blanket understandings of really complex issues. And I think at the end of the day, like, you know, you go to that experience that you've just mentioned, I'd say 80-90% of people that we would class as far-right racist have those concerns, right? And that's why in this country, within the West, class is also such a massive thing that needs to be talked about. You know, the working class, the class that has who fit into this right-wing category have always actually been left behind by this country. And it's not a modern thing at all. Like you can trace this back 400 years, even at the advent of colonialism, that they were the ones they did it to their own people first before they actually did it anywhere else.
Emma Dabiri writes about this brilliantly, where she says actually the invention of colour was in order to split the working classes.
You know, absolutely.
Right?
But why are the Patriots always the poor people?
Yeah.
You could never not really go into a white suburban well-to-do middle-class area and see people painting roundabouts and having flags up.
Yeah.
You'll get that in a working class area.
Okay, but then someone said to me once when I talked about this, and he was a taxi driver, and he was a white taxi driver, he said to me, well, of course you're pro-immigration, because for you, immigration means a gardener or a cleaner or a builder, right? It doesn't mean someone who's going to take your job. It doesn't mean that. I'm not competing with that. I'm resolutely middle class. There's no question about it. I went to a pretty rough state school, but I'm middle class. So immigration affects people in different ways, and you kind of have to understand that and listen to those people whose jobs have been taken by that. Now, when I go to Greggs and it's just Indians working in Greggs, right? And not British Indians, Indians, right? I'm like, wow, okay, that's at a time when there is really serious youth unemployment in this country. You can perhaps understand why the parents of a 19-year-old who cannot get a job anywhere is looking at those people and saying, well, you might not like it, but you have to at least try and understand where that is coming from. Right?
I totally agree with that. And I think also as well, one of the reasons why this conversation gets so heated very quickly, or that there's a misunderstanding around it, is that I think that we're very bad as a country of really having a conversation about Britishness as a concept.
What is it? What is it to you?
What is it
what
to
is
me?
It to you?
I think it's an experiment that's kind of not really worked out. I think we're still living it, and not just Britishness, but I also think Americanness, and I also think Australianness, because these are all constructed identities, and people, you know.
But in America, you're more likely to get even first generation immigrants in America who are very proud of being American.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in this country.
That doesn't happen in this country. But also the idea of you mentioned immigrants, right?
Are you proud to be British Asian?
Not
I don't take
so
pride,
much with
and this
the
is a
British,
conversation we
yeah.
always have.
Yeah.
I don't take pride in being British. I don't take pride in having Pakistani origin, ethnic Kashmiri origin. I don't take pride in any of that.
Yeah.
I don't see myself as a nationalist. I think you can never take true pride in any single political entity or state, because at some point there'll be something that you don't agree with that state doing. And if I'm saying I'm proud, then I'm putting all that baggage on my shoulders, and I just.
But also, just in terms of our work, like, you've got to really go back to where the origins of that idea of statehood of countries came from. That is a colonial thing. You look at the map. That is a very relatively new thing. Like, all those lines on the map that you see, literally within the last 100 years. Literally. Like, before that, the world did not look like that. Societies were not like that. There was no hard borders and things in that kind of way that they are now. Passports, you know, literally started happening more so after the First World War. Before that, it wasn't really a thing. And so the way that we're living in this, in our modern societies, and we think that it's always been like that, it actually hasn't. Until very recently, it hasn't. And so, you know, the idea of nationalism and patriotism actually was, for us, when we've looked into it, an invention of the West. It actually pushed all the other countries to become more nationalistic, like India and all the independence that they were fighting for, because of the fact that they wanted these people out of the country.
Can you give a concrete example where censorship, certainly post-COVID, has stopped you from being able to create something? You said that because you have in control of the entire process, you can't, but you do need to find spaces to do your work, right? And wherever those spaces are, especially if you want to charge people to come in, there's a infrastructure around that. Can you highlight censorship?
Yeah, actually, the film that you just watched, we were going to use the top of a shopping centre to do parts of that, and the response at first, it was all like, this sounds really interesting, etc. And then I don't know if they got whiff of what it was about or something, and they actually came back to us and said, we don't want our space to be used in a video which talks about what you're talking about. So that was it. You're not allowed to use our space.
And the film hasn't been played by some venues because of the word "paki" in it. Like, they were like, oh, we just don't want to get into that kind of thing. It's not that they have an issue about, like, where they sit on the fence with that conversation. It's the fact that they don't want to put on brave stuff like that opens them up to that. And I think that's where we get disappointed.
Well, we've had people tell us that we don't want to play that in the venue because it's offensive. And it was like, look at me.
Yeah.
I've known that word since I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
It's offensive to you as a white woman. What the hell is it to me?
So I once had a conversation with BBC Editorial when we were about to do an interview with the director of Defiance, the Channel 4 documentary series. And they said, BBC Editorial said, we're not happy with you saying the P word. Not Paki, but the P word, not saying that. So this was a white woman I was speaking to on the phone saying, I don't think, because it will offend people. And I went, well, that's because it's offensive. Like, of course it will offend people. The whole point of the documentary is. And then I also said to this person, you don't get to dictate to me the language that I use to describe the lived experience of being South Asian in this country. There is no part of BBC editorial guidance that I will accept that tells me that I cannot have this honest conversation with my audience. And I want my audience, which at 5 Live was largely white, mostly male, bit Daily Mail. I want them to understand what we went through. And still continues.
But also the optics of a white woman telling you that, like, about.
Oh, welcome to the BBC.
Welcome
to the BBC.
No, but that's what's so blinding about this conversation. Like, it's the optics of that. Like, you're telling a person of colour who has been at the blunt end of that conversation that they can't use that word to have a conversation that actually explores that conversation.
Yes.
Like, just make it make sense.
Because it might offend. Oh, but then Yes.
Yeah.
So it's interesting what censorship looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's just the outright banning of stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then there is the we're offended on your behalf, therefore
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think
Kind of.
implicitly that's because
That's like the Heart FM of sponsorship, right? It's like, you know, we're trying to be a bit weird, like normal here. This is like the oat milk latte of censorship.
I think you've got to read between the lines, you know, and I'm glad that you push back on it, because I think that
Why do you think I'm not at the BBC anymore?
but the BBC, you know,
they don't want you to push back on it.
Yeah, well, I realise that in a very long-winded way. I used to work for the BBC for a while, and I kind of realised, I'm sorry to know that about myself. But
I did it for 23 years. I could have murdered someone.
But it's actually another conversation around the institutionalization of this country, which is a remnant of colonialism. The idea, I mean, just look at the funding structures in this country, right? Look at some of the institutions that we hold up, which are regarded as the crown jewels of the nation, right? You have the BBC, you have the BFI, you have the Arts Council. These organisations are literally the main organisations from which a lot of the opportunities, a large part of the opportunities come from in other organisations that get filtered down, right? You've traced that funding back all the way and it goes to DCMS. Right? Now, if that is not a type of imperialism, and I don't know what that is, like the way that that's how power can still have a hold to all of these structures.
But my challenge to that is that I think, so my kids have no brand loyalty to the BBC whatsoever, right? And if you look at brand loyalty or brand awareness, you'll see Instagram and YouTube way above the BBC, way above, right? So, whereas when I joined the BBC acted very much as gatekeepers to creativity, right? So it's like commissioning editors acting like that is no longer the case. If you look at Instagram accounts like Diet Paratha, Juggernaut, Dost Means Friend, you look at these places that every single day they are putting up posts of South Asians doing crazy stuff, like incredible work, right? And my thing is to say to a 19-year-old and says, should I go to the BBC? I'll be like, no. Create it. Create it. Find a network. Find a community. Just this week I was reading about a marketing phenomenon which is now about micro-communities that actually purely exist on Discord and WhatsApp groups, right? So Gucci has 60,000 on Discord. They don't need anyone else, right? Like they're speaking directly to an audience. So for you and what you're doing, the censorship thing is like, you carry on over there, BBC, acting like it's the 1800s. Meanwhile, 20-year-olds are on a whole different flex.
And I think that generation now is what's really interesting, because they are really starting to change up the power dynamics, and the BBC is responding. You know, like this is and other places that
they're trying to play catch up.
They're trying to play catch up, and I think it doesn't look good for them. You know, and I think this is one of the reasons why you know, you have conversations that are changing, because power will never give itself up. It has to be taken, and it has to be. You cannot go to power and say, "Well, is it all right if you share it a little bit?" It doesn't happen. It's never happened in history, and it never will happen. And I think that's one of the reasons. And within a capitalist structure, the money talks, right? And so when you have an interest in a certain area, when there's money coming into a certain area, you'll quickly see that conversation change, and suddenly all the morality for a certain standpoint will completely be shifted to another side. And I think that is what's so different about where we are as a global society, much more interconnected, and we're much more responding to things that maybe in the past we could have just said, oh, it's not really our problem, we don't need to engage with that. And I think that this is what's going to change up the conversation around censorship. During the pandemic, we launched a platform called Offstage, which was basically it's like The Stage, if anyone's familiar with it. It's the sort of central place of where reviews, platforms of artists are done. And we were trying to basically platform Black, Asian and global majority artists from our own perspective. So we would review shows, we would interview people, we would, you know, have news pieces, but all from a different lens, right? Very successful when it happened, like within the pandemic. It was one of our more successful things that we had done till that point. And then after the pandemic thing wore off, and we started veering more towards investigative journalism. So, you know, looking at stories and reporting on stories that the major press within the sector was not looking at. That's where things started getting really interesting, because there was this feeling that stories were not being reported on, or we were being actively closed, or the platform was being marginalised, so that it wouldn't get oxygen on that. And the only reason why some of the stories have hit and have landed is because the audience didn't let them let them be forgotten. They'll be sharing it. And so then you build a community, and through that community itself, it pushes back on it. So it's hard work, but it's kind of like, I think it's a necessary conversation that you just carry on.
Before I open it up to you guys to ask questions, I want to ask you what you think of Bait by Riz Ahmed and Guz Khan.
Have
you seen any of the promotion around it though?
I
keep seeing things on my feed. I'm seeing a lot of Riz Ahmed in the last few days on the feed, but I don't know much about it.
No,
okay.
I'll be honest.
And did you see his version of Hamlet?
No, we haven't seen that either.
Okay.
I've got to say, I think with this is a really interesting conversation as well, because we were talking about Riz Ahmed a couple of weeks ago.
How can you be South Asian and not be talking about Riz Ahmed?
Yeah.
Riz Ahmed is
because he really was, like, especially I'd say maybe about 10 years ago, like he was the thing, right? Like he was one of the very few artists that has broken through to the mainstream. Really, was,
the crossover to America.
You know,
as well,
and coming from that kind of hip hop spoken word, you know, it was that, and he really emulated that. And I think then when he got this, the big show that he did, and I can't remember what it was.
The Night Of on HBO.
Well, that was amazing. I thought it was the film that he did. It was that.
He was in Rogue One. He was in.
It was in Star Wars, right? When he had that, and then he got married. And I think there was a slight change in the way that the projects that he was selecting and the thing that he was kind of coming back from. We were just really talking about it, and we were just like, I don't know how has that made things positive for the Asian artist. It doesn't feel like anything's happened. It doesn't feel like the representation has been pushed along for us with that. It did for a time when he was breaking through, and then it's just kind of amounted to nothing.
Yeah, but it's typical.
I think that's so unfair.
Do you think?
Well, because I think that's so unfair. So I think what his plan always was to become super mainstream and then use that leverage to create the kind of work that he wanted to create for his community. If you look at Bait, Bait is so South Asian. If you think about, he spent, and I interviewed him on stage not that long ago about Hamlet. 20 years he has been waiting to make Hamlet. So actually, it is the opposite of what you've just said. By making Bait, I'm 54, the idea that Bait would exist when I was 19, now my kids get to see Bait. They get to see Guz Khan. They get to see Man Like Mobeen. They get to see We Are Lady Parts. They get to see these things that I would never. I had Goodness Gracious Me and the Kumars at number 42, and after those two things finished, nothing. Nothing. Now, almost every 6 months, there will be a South Asian in a spot doing bits, whether it be music. I mean, I Had a Dream, who DJ'd here last night, did a track with Skrillex. Like, if you look across the vibes, and I know you know all about the music.
But the conversation is it actually changing the structure, though? Like, the reason why...
they're making its own structure.
Yeah, but that's the point that I'm making. So artists...
Creating their own empire.
In terms of the general artists, and you've got to get to a sort of level of power to be able to do that,
and
right?
that was his point.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
But that opportunity is not available to 99% of the artists.
It's not available to 99% of white people, or 99% of black people.
Well, I would argue with that, because I think...
Well, look, okay, you try being a white working class actor, and you look at Tom Hiddleston and Benedict Cumberbatch and any number of Etonians, and you tell me that kid in Stoke-on-Trent in an estate has got an equal chance, has got any more of a chance.
It's not that it's an equal chance.
But also as well, Riz Ahmed went to Haberdashers private school, and he went to Oxford, right? Just to be clear, right? Like he went the establishment route, although he was from like Wembley, right? Like he wasn't from things. So it's not easy for anyone to get.
Of course. So that's not the point that I'm making. I'm not saying that it hasn't been easy, because he's got to that level, right? Yeah. The point is that he's making those things within his own production companies, within the structures that he's created to allow him to do that. Yeah. How much is that affecting the companies like, you know, the distributors, the companies that are still the main preserve for 99% of the people that are putting in proposals. Those infrastructures are siloed from the structures that he's got. Great, like I absolutely, yeah, I've not seen Bait, but I know that, you know, it looks cool, and I probably would watch it. And I know that there's representation. The conversation is being changed by exactly these types of these projects, but these don't seem to be affecting this other behind the scenes mechanism that you're having to put in a parallel system to be able to get those projects off the ground.
But that is not you're having to. It's just you should, because if you rely on the BBC, when I was a Radio 1 DJ, it was a gatekeeper thing, and then it changed. So I started in 2002. 2009, I joined Twitter, right? And then we were no longer the gatekeepers. We were curators and filters, but we weren't gatekeepers anymore. And over time, we have had less. Who the hell really listens to a Radio 1 DJ anymore?
Yeah,
for like, you know, your Spotify algorithm is giving you much more recommendations than you tuning into the new music show. And I love Jack Saunders at Radio 1, and he does an incredible show. But it's all changed.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
and it's not just Riz Ahmed. If you look at Dreaming Whilst Black, have you seen Dreaming Whilst Black?
Yeah.
The guy that owns that production company is South Asian. Did you know that? Danny Joshi. And Danny Joshi's head of production is a South Asian man that was super high at the BBC. So they've built it.
Yeah, within a different American context, though. And I think that's the other thing as well, because we're talking about the American context, which is completely different.
Dreaming Whilst Black is British.
But the
Danny
production
Joshi,
company, wasn't that production company based
Danny Joshi's British.
Isn't his production company based in America?
No, he's based here.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a meeting with him
great.
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Well, I think it's just going back to what you said earlier about, you know, the fact that, and this conversation always comes up about the white working class, and, you know, they've got it just as hard. And I think there's more simple way to...
I don't think they have it just as hard.
Yeah. Well, I guess so.
It's
Yeah.
much harder to be a young British Muslim.
The most simple way of putting it is the fact that no matter what intersectionalities you may have as a white person, your skin colour in this society will never be a problem for you, and will never be a barrier for you. And I think that's the main thing that we need to remember.
Well, global warming might. You might be more likely to get skin cancers. But okay, we're gonna open it up now, guys, because this has been brilliant, by the way. A round of applause, please.
Thank you.
It's so far. You've been
Andrew.
absolutely brilliant. Well, challenge, which is what I do. Right, hands up. Let's get some questions. We'll get a mic to you. Subu, I think's got the mic. There you go. Brilliant. Oh, I'm just going to say this very quickly. Ask a question. Don't give a speech. All right? We haven't got time for it. Okay.
That's perfectly fine. Thank you very much. I want to take it a slightly different direction, which is without going into a spiel, because exactly as
Ask
you
a
said.
question, my friend.
Yeah, I am going to do.
Thank you.
Absolutely now.
Don't censor him.
No, I'm not. I'm literally asking him to do the thing I've asked him to do, which is ask a question.
Censorship in South Asia is taking a weird turn. I'm not going to go into the discussion around that. How can we, as creatives here, help that conversation or tell stories which are not being told in terms of South Asia? So a specific example would be Censorship, which was a brilliant film on the caste system, which when they tried to censor it in India, it became absolutely impossible, and yet we sent it forward to the Oscars for the international category, and I got to see the film, and it was an absolutely brilliant film. Similarly, there's a massive Tamil superstar right now who's having struggle with his last final film before he goes into politics being censored. How can we do what we're doing?
So how can the diaspora, creative diaspora, help South Asians in the region
who are struggling with
to
censorship?
avoid censorship? Wow.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Over to you guys.
I mean, do they even want us to?
Yeah,
there's a
I
big
think
disconnect.
so. This is actually an interesting, because I was going to make this point in the conversation, but you've asked this question, which kind of links to it. Is that I think the idea of when you talk about the South Asian diaspora, let's just talk about South Asian diaspora, not diaspora in general, right? We're very unique in this country because actually the diaspora that came over after Windrush and in the 60s, 70s and 80s with the major migrations from South Asia, those communities of people that exist in this country now have a completely different experience to the migrants that are coming over now, right? The infrastructure that has been built by those generations in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, that experience for that 40, 50-year period was absolutely unique, and that British Asian or British black experience cannot really be understood by anybody outside of those communities, right? Like that is definitely one of the things that we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, and through that experience, a new culture has emerged. We've created a completely different culture that is neither Indian or Asian, and is neither British, right? And I think that really gives us a completely different perspective and dynamic to the question that you've asked. Because first of all, I think a lot of that generation especially the third and fourth generation Asians are not so closely linked to that diaspora as they were. So those issues don't seem like they're our issues anymore.
Unless they're
right?
political.
Unless they're political,
Yeah, because in terms of politics, you see that all the time. Something happens in India and Pakistan and you've got a massive protest in Bradford as a response to that. But I think when it comes to
Manchester,
Manchester, but I think when it comes to the arts, I don't know, I mean, I personally feel I always talk to you about this. I'm completely disconnected from
the
Bollywood, for example. I wouldn't know.
But I also think that the things that are happening in South Asia right now, that's obviously of concern. That is still of concern to us, right?
Yeah.
What could we do? I think, first of all, even though I've said that, it's really risky to have art be censored by politics, art in itself is inherently political, right?
Of course.
That dichotomy exists. And I think that we need to kind of make those stories, but try to educate these other diasporas, the other layers of diasporas that are coming in. So like for me, that's the only tool that we have, making more films that express that story, but also being clear about where that experience sits within the wider diasporic story.
Well, it was like the partition event that we did in Leeds. There was people in the audience. I think there was a first generation Indian student, and there was also a first generation Pakistani student in the audience. And they put their hands up at the end of the show and said, our experience, our understanding of partition is about celebration, about freedom. What you guys are presenting here is so dark, we've never thought about it like that. It was a completely different perspective. And I think the reason that's happened is because once that line of control has been set between Pakistan and India, they've kind of just got on with their lives. Whereas with our ancestors who came here, they brought that trauma with them and were once again re-traumatized because they were then subjected to racism and oppression in this country. So we've got a very different experience, and the way that we understand our history is completely different to these people that were born in Pakistan and India. Because I always say this to you, if we didn't come to England, people like me and Taj wouldn't know each other because we're from two different parts of Punjab. Whereas in Pakistan and India, the people that are across the border will probably never meet.
I'm going to stop you there, but because we want to try and get some more questions. Just very quickly, Chuck D from Public Enemy once said that without Ronald Reagan, Public Enemy would never existed. Therefore, in times of political upheaval, great art is created. And you don't want that political upheaval necessarily. You don't want oppression so you can create a great painting. That's not great. But there is a link. Any questions over this side? Any more questions?
There must be some questions. No?
You've been so these two have now sorted everything out in your minds ever, and you have no other questions about censorship. Thank you. For a moment there, I thought you'd solved everything.
Right?
I'm going to try and articulate myself. So I'm from Darwin, Australia. I moved to England a couple of years ago. The one thing I think where I identify myself as an Australian, Australia's quite a conservative place.
Are you a proud Australian?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I think what sort of lacks, like when I listen to you guys that are a bit older than me, and you sort of there's a lot of trail.
How dare you?
Sorry.
I literally could be your dad. That's how old I am. Yeah. Go on, please get to the question, though.
So culturally in Australia, I think that the thing that sort of underpins difference is the way the Indigenous people have been treated, and the sort of ethnic diaspora that has come after migration sort of opened up and things like that has really dictated how people self-identify. Like in Australia, and that's a big thing. Like
I need a question.
Sorry, my question is in Britain, how do you guys sort of identify that sort of rhetoric? What is it about British culture that sort of, I guess, separates you? You talked about the class system, and 300-400 years ago, there being this sort of real sort of peasant culture, and then sort of
So
ethnic.
what is it? What is it that makes you British?
Yeah, what is it
Is
that
it-
makes you British? Like, what makes me
Why would
Australian?
an Asian want to be British? Is that what why
Yeah.
would you attach that label to your
Yeah.
identity? Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
question?
So you,
Exactly, yeah.
sorry, just very quickly, do you have a caveat to it? So are you Asian Australian, or are you just straight Aussie?
I'd say, it's 100% of both. Like,
So what, you're Aussie, Sri
Yeah.
Lankan, Aussie,
South
Indian?
Indian.
South?
South Indian.
So wow, so specifically South Indian. You want to
Yeah.
get even more specific? Are you Tamil?
No,
Are you
I'd say I'm
Malayan?
South Indian. Oh, well, Kannada.
Right. Okay.
Telugu, Bangalore.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, which I think is so different to like how you guys have grown up in,
So
or with your origins.
firstly, I would say a caveat on that is, and I don't know if people hold an Asian network phone-in show like I did for many years.
Yeah.
I found that Scottish Asians were really proud to be
Yeah.
Scottish
Yeah,
Asians,
yeah.
and English Asians
Yeah.
weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, like you would never see
I don't
like
think they-
I'm English Punjabi, whereas the Scottish, but I'm Scottish Punjabi, like, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. So even just like saying an English thing, like saying
Yeah.
British Asian is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to my wife about this just literally yesterday, and I said the reason that is a question that's so fully loaded and no one can answer it is because I don't know what English culture is. What is true English British culture? And if there was something, I mean, whether it's Morris dancing or whatever, why has it not been celebrated by the indigenous people to be able to pass it on to the people that have come in? It's almost like they've kind of moved away from it as well to this generic whatever the culture
No,
is.
they didn't. You Muslims
what-
destroyed it. It's like, I think it's what I think that's having listened to Reform UK. That's what I've heard. You guys just, but like what? You guys went around beating up Morris Star. That's what I heard.
But I think
His brothers couldn't do their shit anymore because you were like cussing them out. That's haram.
I'm building a mosque in there today as well.
yeah. I think there's we were having this conversation, right? We use English and British interchangeably as if they're the same thing. They have slightly different meanings, right? Especially now. And I think also as well, in order for the British, and I'm talking about white British elites, right? In order for them to be able to maintain that this is a diverse country and that we don't get fractured societies, the term British was invented and more popularized because anyone could identify as being British if you lived in this country, right? Whereas English,
Not according to Matt Goodwin.
well, yeah, that's a different conversation. But like with English, there was a different association that was put onto that, and that was if you're white, you could be English, but if you're black or brown, you could never be English, but you could be British. But people use these words interchangeably,
Yeah.
and I think there's a confusion around those terminologies, which is why I think self-identification is the way that the governments use to lay off blame and how they categorize people. If you think about it, self-identification is one of the reasons why the problem of the labels and categorization exists, because you might get one Asian person, for instance yourself, classifying yourself as South Indian, right, Australian South Indian, but you might get another Australian South Indian saying that they're just Australian, and they completely take off the South Indian moniker from their thing.
Or you
And that
got a
would
white
also-
Australian saying you can't be Australian.
Yeah.
Which
If
is
you said
wild.
you're a white Australian, then I'd be a bit confused. But yeah. But you know, like the point is like that could happen, and that would be equally accepted by the population, right? And I think this is what's created the problem in our country, because you do have black and Asian people who call themselves British, and that is it. They don't add any ethics to that, right?
Suella Braverman.
So yeah, well, yeah, and all of the other.
She doesn't even want her own parents here, I think. by all accounts.
But I think that is one of the questions that we need to really reckon with in this country.
I think people just want to use this idea of what is British to continue the argument. If you think about it, we've probably all been doing British things for years. Like, what is British? Going to Greggs, getting a pasty from Greggs, bonfire night is British. Like, what is it? Music is British.
Do you know what is interesting about being British, which I've found, is speaking to cab drivers who've come from other parts of the world. A cab driver said to me, a Pakistani guy, he said to me, the police here are not going to stop me, ask me for a bribe and beat me up, right? So there is a sense that Britishness, and we're allowed to criticise, right? We criticise more than perhaps we should. From the outside, Britishness is about fairness.
Yeah.
It's about a rule of law. right?
Yeah.
There are certain things, and people go, well, that's universal, it is, but some of the countries we come from, like where I come from in Sri Lanka for many years, and it's changed a lot because we've got a brilliant new government in now who's really cracking down on corruption, but you could almost get away with anything if you were rich, right?
Yeah.
We've literally stripped someone of the royal family, a son of the king, a brother of the king. We've taken him out. You try and do that in Dubai, any of the Emirates, in Saudi. You try and do that in America. Look at Mandelson and Andrew. Not a single American has had anything taken away from
right
them.
at the end, when there was no other choice.
Yeah, but
it wasn't something that was kind of.
You're a pint half empty kind of guy. I'm getting the vibe from that. Like you are that. That's not radical. That's pessimistic.
But would you say that was an inherently British response? What they did? But that inherently British thing?
Well, if you compare it to other parts of the world, people in America are looking at us and going, look what you did to look what you literally did to a member of your royal family. That guy now, I was speaking to someone who knows one of his daughters not that long ago and was saying he has been stripped of everything, and rightly so, but that wouldn't happen in virtually any other part of the world.
No, but that's self-preservation. It's not to uphold any type of value. I think that's what it is. Like, if you let's get
no,
real,
there
right?
is no. It can be both. It can be both simultaneously. That's what you like.
So
it can be the self-preservation of the royal family at one point, which absolutely to protect the reputation. But just to be clear, the reports will say that William loathes his uncle. He loathes him. He loathes everything he stands for.
Yeah.
He loathes his hubris. He loathes all of this stuff, right? And yes, it can be about but it can also be about he's a wrong 'un, right? And we don't want him anything to do with our family. Let's face it, there are enough wrong-uns in our families. My mum grew up with an uncle that she was literally told, don't go be in a room alone with this guy, right? And the royal family are allowed to do the same thing and go, don't be alone in a room with that guy, right?
Yeah.
So it can be true. And like I said, when you compare it to other royal families in the world, a lot of them are looking... I mean, anywhere in the Middle East where there are royal families, we'll be looking at and looking shook. They'll be like, that could never happen here. There is someone very senior in one of the royal families in that region of the world who is all over the Epstein files, all over it, talking about prostitutes, talking about all of it. Not a damn thing will happen to that person.
I think if you have enough pressure, I don't know. Maybe we're going to have to agree to disagree.
From a free press.
From a free press,
right?
Yeah.
Well, which again, in those parts of the world, isn't a free press.
Okay, but we can also have a conversation about how free our press really is here as well. Like that's a different
a lot more
conversation.
free than that. I get the sense that what you want is perfection.
I think,
and you're willing to ignore.
I think as a society,
for perfection.
I think as a society we should strive for it. We should strive for it.
Yes,
but at the same time,
but you'll never reach it.
Yeah, but in the pursuit of that, you'll get somewhere, right?
Yes.
You'll get somewhere. And I think, on the one hand, I totally agree and I accept what you're saying in terms of British values. But at the same time, one could make an argument and say, well, if that's the way that British values are described, the rule of law, freedom, and all this kind of stuff, it starts looking like that is the place where all of those virtues originated from, as if no other place in the country has ever had those values, as if these are inherently British Western things, and everybody else is just completely wrong, right? I think that is the problem that I have with that, because realistically, when you're talking about British values, really what are they? And how can you describe any culture to have any? Like, if someone was to say to me, what's South Asian culture? I don't know what South Asian culture is.
People talk about South Asian values all the time. Family. They talk about our brilliant food. We do. We identify with the South Asian values all the time. Because how many people in South Asian people goes, don't become westernized to their children?
It's just different values, though. You could equally say, like, what, is family not a big thing in the West? Like, okay, yeah, I understand that it's...
Well, it depends what part of the West, because it might not be...
We're
being told...
Right, this is brilliant. We can do this. We'll all do this together. Why don't we all just meet up? The Australians getting the beers in for obvious reasons. Or soft drinks, of course.
But just to also say, this is actually part of a bigger event that we want to
stereotype, I apologise.
This is a bigger event that we want to have a conversation about censorship in, and hopefully we will work with Myth and Factory to kind of, because I think this is a really important conversation, and I think we want to continue this, and we're here for a little while. We can have a chat if anyone wants to talk to us afterwards. But
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for staying way over time. Round of applause, please, for Taj and Sam. Very, very good. Very good. Brilliant. Brilliant.
That was great.
It's not bad for a Saturday afternoon, is it? Better than watching football, especially if you're a Tottenham fan like I am.
You help me deal with what I'm feeling.